In today's video, I'm taking the Fruitful Harvest stamp from IOD and making a festive fall pillow. And the first thing I do is take all my stamps that I know I'm going to be using, and I also am using the masks that come with the stamp. And I'm using the masks as my pattern. So I begin by tracing around the design, the parts of the design that I want to stand out in the foreground, which in this case is the one of the leaves. And then once the design is all traced out, this case it is an oak leaf, I take my fabric paints and I just paint it in. And I'm blending and mixing some water in and blending so that I get kind of a pretty authentic looking autumn leaf. And once I like the design and it seems the painting is perfect, I'm going to stamp that stamp with black ink. Next thing I do is cover it with a mask, and then I am going to draw out my next leaf. And this is what I did for all of the three leaves. I covered them with masks. I've used the masks as my design patterns, and then I painted them in. And after they were painted in and dried, I stamped them. And then I moved on to the pumpkins. I am using a fabric paint, and I'm painting similar to how you would paint if you were painting with watercolors, by adding water to the detail, adding the darker paint along the edges, and then blending it in. And this paint has to be heat sealed once it's all set, and so does the ink. So once I get this dried, I will stamp on the leaf, which this one is the maple leaf, and then we will continue with the pumpkins. So as I stamp the maple leaf, I mask out the oak leaf so that the maple leaf appears to be behind the oak leaf. Again, I'm just using a black ink to stamp over the painted design. I continued by tracing over the masks from the pumpkins, and I know it's hard to see, but I am just going to do the exact same thing. I am painting with fabric paint. I'm going to paint one pumpkin at a time, blend paint, try to get it to be an authentic orange, and then I'm going to let it dry and stamp it. And as I stamp, I'm going to be masking up what I do not want to stamp over, the items that I want to be in the back. So it's just looks very, very orange, or actually very red, but you'll see as I keep blending and mixing other colors, a little more yellow, a little white, I get a pretty good color for this pumpkin. This is a larger pumpkin, and the one pumpkin of the smaller stamp is in front and one is in back of this big giant pumpkin. And one by one, I stamped each pumpkin, masking out the leaves in the front. And then once it was time to do the bigger pumpkin, masking out the smaller pumpkin. And you'll see I just masked and stamped till I got the whole um, piece all stamped. Now you'll also see that I did some background stamping with the IOD Vintage Textures stamp, and for some reason it did not come up on my video. I must not have pushed record, but I do that in across um, the whole pillow cover. Once I had it all stamped and I looked at the pumpkins, I did go back and kind of lighten up that pumpkin to the right, which came out a little more brown than I wanted it to. I just used a little bit more paint and then I stamped over it a second time. And these pumpkins are pretty easy to re-stamp them. The design is pretty easy to go over. And now I wanted to add a little typography to the top of my pillow cover. So I took out my typesetting stamps and I began stamping. And the first thing I stamped is its. And I'm going to stamp out It's Pumpkin Time. And again, I'm not quite sure why I didn't get the recording of the first bit of typography, but you see what it is. And it is the typesetting stamp from IOD. It has small and uppercase letters, so you can get a really nice design. The Fruitful Harvest stamp from IOD is a couple of years old and it was a limited edition. You can still find it on Etsy. Just Google it and you'll find it. The IOD typesetting stamp is a basic stamp and it is still available. It is my go-to for stamping letters, and I am using one of the thin mounts and I am putting the stamps right to the thin mounts and putting ink on the back, and then I go ahead and I stamp it. And I get my stamps from Steel Roots Market, and I will link the um, IOD typesetting stamp in the description to where you can get this stamp. And it is the perfect stamp for stamping on fabric and making signs because the letters are so easy to read, and they also have kind of like a typewriter, a vintage typewriter look. So they're perfect for this kind of work. And once the typography is all set, I have to make an apostrophe, and I do that with a Sharpie marker. But once everything is all set, I let it dry overnight, and then I heat set it with my Cricut press. This is an 18 by 18 inch pillow cover, and I will also link the pillow cover in the details. Basically, it's an off-white. I would say it's a little bit of a creamy white. It's cotton and it has an invisible zipper down the bottom and it actually opens all the way, which is nice. It makes it so much easier to get a pillow in it. So I will link that in the description also. So I am putting, it's very easy with the thin mounts to get your letters all lined up so that they're nice and straight and the spaces in between them are even, because you'll see the thin mounts have a grid line and they also have a curve line in case you wanted your typography to be on a curve. And once I heat set everything, I stuffed it with a pillow form, and then it was all ready to be fall decor.